Let's try this again.
Sure.
Just to see if it works. Sometimes it just, it gets a little buzz in it. Yeah, that should work.
Thank you. All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. So welcome. It's good to have you here on a lovely day, for sure. So I affirm that you'll be enjoying the lovely weather we're having today after the service. So I want to explore how I came to be here today, like how I literally came to be standing here in this spot today. And what had happened a few weeks ago was Carol had emailed me and simply asked if I was available to speak. So it's pretty simple. There's not a whole lot of complexity with that. She said, and she was going to be out of town, and she is. And she said, asked if I would be available to speak. And I said yes. So here I am. So basically what happened was Carol planned to be away. She contacted me. They asked if I would be available. I said yes, and here I am. Pretty simple. So if we look at that, that's really cause and effect. Right? So Carol had made an intention to be away. She contacted me. I agreed, or I said yes, and I'm here. And in our experience from day to day, we pretty much are mindful or we're operating in alignment with this very linear way of being, that something happens, we respond to it, and then something else happens, or we take an action, and then there's a result of that action, and so forth. Very linear. So the question of how I came to be here today, from a mystical point of view, is a lot more complex. So for instance, my being standing here today speaking to you actually starts at least 16 years ago when I first was introduced to Unity. And that set me on a course of learning the Unity teachings and becoming a chaplain and eventually becoming a speaker. And that's not all there is to it, because there's a part of this story that's about moving from Chicago, where I live, to Valparaiso. And some of you may know Kathy Sipple. So Kathy Sipple is one of the first people I met in Valpo. And then in talking to her, found out we had a common linkage with Unity. So then she ultimately introduced me to Carol. So there's these other things that are going on, right? So in the kind of the bigger picture of it, there's a really long, complex story and nonlinear way that I got here. And then if we want to even take a bigger look at that, my journey of being here today with you all really started like 30 years ago, when I was working for a large company, and one of my friends and mentors was a speaker and really inspired me to become a speaker myself. And if I hadn't met him and hadn't started on that journey, I might not be standing here today. Okay. So then if we take the picture and it gets bigger, this comes down to just me being born. Right? If I wasn't born into like physical manifestation, I wouldn't be with you here today. So there's really this very intricate, nonlinear web of things that happen for all of us that ultimately result in us being here today, and it's all good. You may know the movie "It's a Wonderful Life," kind of the classic Christmas movie, and the movie is really about George Bailey's wish to have never been born, ultimately, and what he learns about what would happen to the people that he influenced had he not been born. Right? So he has this experience, right, with Clarence the angel, and he gets this gift. George Bailey gets this great gift to see how everybody else would have turned out had he not been born. And the stories aren't always so pleasant, and the people don't always aren't as satisfied or as happy, or things don't turn out as well for a lot of others, because if George wasn't born. So another dynamic at work with all of this is what we might call an attractor pattern or an attitude. Right? So when George Bailey asks not to be born, he's removing himself. He's removing himself from contributing to an attractor pattern. So if you remember the movie, George Bailey is a very generous, happy, loving, outgoing, altruistic person. And he attracts people into his world who need those things, who are nourished by his presence, who benefit from his optimism, his encouragement, his love, and ultimately his faith. So when he experiences this profound gift of not having been born and understanding what happens to people without the benefit of his contributing to existence, he really comes to realize that his life is purposeful. So the spark, or we could say the ignition, that sets everything into motion really is thought. So this is what we're getting to is George Bailey comes into the world before he influences everyone. He has a thought. He has many thoughts, and we all do. So George Bailey, if I remember it correctly, he wants to travel the world. He wants to help make lives better for people. He has all these thoughts about very positive things that he wants to do to contribute to life and to the well-being of others. So that's the spark, the ignition. None of that could happen without those thoughts. And then the fuel is the faith or the belief. And then ultimately shifting the machine, if we want to use a machine metaphor, or shifting the car into gear, is the action that one takes. Right? So we have the ignition, the fuel, and then shifting into gear. The thought, the faith or belief, and then the action. So this all then, as I was meditating on how I was going to present my talk, the scripture that came to me was Mark 11:24, when Jesus said, "Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." And what that's doing is it's taking the statement of seeing is believing. We're all familiar with this statement, seeing is believing. It turns it upside down. And it converts that statement into the truth of believing is seeing, which in our linear world doesn't always make sense. How could I believe in something if I don't see it? Show me the evidence in order for me to believe it. But if whatever you ask for in prayer, and prayer metaphysically is thought, right? Our thoughts are prayers. Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it. So the belief comes first. Believe that you have received it and it will be yours. So with today's meditation, I invited you to consider an attitude that you've desired to have. Right? So for instance, if it was prosperity, like if you were having a prosperity challenge, and by accepting and having a belief of prosperity, that's where it starts. And then taking that attitude forward into your life, ponder all of the prosperity that is flowing not only to you, but through you and as you. You might have seen the bicycles chained outside. So Tanya and I biked here this morning, and it was it was just a lovely morning to do that. And, I felt energized, and I felt like the world's my oyster, because it's me, the bike, the sun, the weather, and just the being in motion, the healthy feeling of being in motion. And that's my prosperity this morning. The Charles Fillmore had said that it wasn't necessary to understand how all the mechanics of everything work, like all the mysticism. So, if I go back 30 years ago and I was working with my mentor to become a speaker, I'd have no idea that I'd be standing here in front of you today. And I wouldn't know all of the other things that would ultimately happen in my life in order to build a portfolio of speaking engagements. So Charles Fillmore had said it's not necessary to know how all of that works and how all of it will work. He compared it to the electrical system. He said it's not necessary for us to understand how the mechanics of faith work, and it's not necessary for us to know how the electrical wiring in this building works. All we really need to be mindful of is that when you flip the switch, the light goes on. And that's how faith works. Now, this is not to say that we don't need, or it's not to say that we shouldn't be curious. And that's why we do the deeper work. We learn more about the meaning and the presence and the power of God. And as we learn more, we come to appreciate how everybody embraces the divine. Because it's all different for each of us. Even within unity, it's different for each of us because we experience it uniquely. We're all unique manifestations of the divine, so of course it's going to be different. And that's okay. So we can be curious about that, and we can also know that, if it's getting to be too complicated for me and my head's spinning, all I need to know is that I flip on the switch of faith and the light goes on. Right. Emmett Fox had written in a short essay called The Golden Key that it was really only necessary, regardless of your tradition, your religion, regardless of how much or how little you knew of theology, that all you really have to do is just be mindful of the presence of God. And that was enough, and that is enough to resolve any of your challenges. Should I shut that off? Okay. So, Emmett Fox had written in The Golden Key that, it was really just necessary to do your part, which was to be mindful of the presence of God in the midst of your challenges, in the midst of your desires and your hopes and your dreams. Do your part, and God will never fail to do God's part. And we don't need to know how the electrical wiring works, and we don't need to know how the mechanics work, or whatever metaphor you want to use for the mysticism. All we need to be mindful of is that it works. So, the other reason that I invited you to pick an attitude that you've desired to have really goes back to our daily word today, because the daily word talks about the affirmation is, I envision all people building a world of peace on a foundation of love. And it says, from my limited human perspective, I may feel powerless as I consider the news of the world. And the truth is that each one of us is immensely powerful. And accepting and allowing a life affirmative attitude of peace, love, calm, whatever it is for you, opening your heart to accept that and allow it to express through you and as you are contributing to an attractor field, an attractor pattern. And people will sense that in some small way or in some big way. They will know as you go out into the world and you express as love and as peace, as calm, as prosperous. People may not be able to put their finger on it, but they'll think there's something about that person that is moving me. And this may not be the actual words that's going on, but they're just in their conscious or subconscious, there's something that they say that person is influencing me in a positive way. And I'm going to pay attention to that. And it's no heavy lifting on your part other than to express that new or that renewed attitude. So I invite you to continue to work with that idea today and through the week. Is consider the attitude you prefer to have in your life as you go forward. And if you're feeling powerless because of what's happening out in the world or in the media or in the news, then just remember that the truth is that the presence of God is infinitely more powerful than the appearance of anything that's happening in this world. And that you have the power to influence others simply by the attitude that you choose to have. And just allow that to fill your soul. And express it as comfortably, as naturally, and as freely and as easily as you can. Because it doesn't take heavy lifting to do it. The power of the mind is a wonderful thing, and I honor all of that power in each of you. So namaste, and enjoy your day. Thank you.